Welcome to Conscious Dominance, a DSRX studio production. These weekly conversations explore how to approach mindful leadership and inner dominance within the powerful container of committed, intentional relationships. Join Eric as he invites new dialogues, sharing practical insights for how the craft of consciousness opens the aperture to love, serve, and connect with unwavering presence.
Welcome to another episode of Conscious Dominance. I'm Eric, and today I want to dive into a concept I call embrace the suck. Last week I spoke about the foundation, really, of what it is to be holding space, containing, creating a situation for Rachel to completely be in a surrendered space. And so the central question that I want to explore today really is, how do I contain, dominate, host, and lead Rachel? How do I lead an expansive, powerful woman without diminishing her light or holding her back or keeping her in a contorted, bracing space? And this matters to me because ultimately what I value is a woman who's expanding, who's powerful, who's fully alive, and who herself embraces the suck, embraces being alive, embraces the fullness of her surrender and loves it. And in order to do that, I have to learn to embrace my own suck. There's a paradox in this. Like all truth, many women, they resist this receptivity and surrender because they know that along with it comes that immature, controlling dynamic. And I want to talk about today how it's my capacity to embrace my own discomfort and even to embrace her discomfort. This is the essential path to creating the kind of dynamic that the containment allows for her energy to flourish and to expand rather than just to contract. And ultimately, this is about growing in my capacity to be triggered, growing in my capacity to learn from those triggers, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, growing the fuck up. And this is actually what it is to be in a foundation of a healthy DSRX relationship, meaning it is devotion and service. Another way of saying it, it's a dynamic sexual relationship that expands. And it is a fundamental and foundational relationship wing of Arosha. The fundamental tension is that there is a challenge of holding space for feminine expression while maintaining my masculine presence and differentiating between presence and control, or egoic control. There's a fundamental tension, though, at all times between containment and expansion. And it's navigating this tension and understanding this tension that really is the relationship. Rachel's not someone who's going to be a trad wife. She's not. And just like our previous episode with Andrew and myself, where we talked about how DS relationships can look different than the stereotype, I'm here to tell you that I'm in a relationship that has a power dynamic, and it's not trad wife. It's not my vision for her. It's not what I want from her. I am not here interested in a woman who just stays at home. I am inspired by her expansion. I'm inspired by her ideas. I'm committed to them. I see them as essential to the world. I see the light that is in her eyes when she's speaking, when she's loving, when she's expanding, when she's helping others, when she's sharing her gifts with the world. She's alive in it. I want to see that come bigger and better. There's an inherent paradox, though, in this. It's going to bump up against my ego. This is challenging. I'm not going to say this is easy for me. I'm not going to say that my ego hasn't been tested. She's also an extremely sexual being, and her sexuality expands beyond my confines and my limitations. And so there is a humbling truth in this partnership that I want to speak about, and that's essential to my growth. And all of us, in order to be expansive beings, the only way to truly be an expansive being that's sustainable and that over the long term is to learn how to die, to embrace the suck, to embrace the difficult things, and to even embrace death while we're here and while we're alive. The universe is constantly expanding, and it's actually the feminine's job to be in that expansion. And in her expansion, she catalyzes and transforms and initiates my growth, my capacity to grow and to hold her. I have to grow to it. It forces that upon me. The dynamic forces that. She doesn't force it. And I'm going to speak to this. It's not her saying, hey, you must grow up. You must do this. I've never heard Rachel nag. She's the opposite of nagging. But it's merely in her speaking her truth and in her expression that in order for me to be competent, in order for me to show up in the right energy, I must grow. So there's a dynamic between us that's humbling. And I cannot, like I said, entirely meet and be the container that she needs at all times. I have to see it as a dynamic container. Ironically, it's in my admission of my incapacity that allows me to show up in a way where I become more attuned to the right energy, and that I'm learning that it is my energy first and foremost that underlies any of my material capacity to show up. The relationship itself is a vessel for transformation. It is a practice. It is something more akin to a martial art or yoga practice than any sort of relationship that I've been in before. And this is where I will speak to it. We each have our unique responsibilities and practices that are separate from the relationship. It is the DSRX. We have different acronyms for what this means. The one that I'm working with today is the dynamic sexual relationship expansion. It's a mouthful, but it speaks to it. It expands in its capacity to be DS. And it can only take place through devotion and service. The RX component of this refers to both the health, wellness aspect of RX as well as the retrograde aspect of RX and all that that implies. The paradox of polarity and expansion is that it necessitates a breakdown. It necessitates the capacity to be in the RX. It's not just pure expansion at all times. And the irony is that in order to expand, you must break down, you must contract. But it's how well do you contract and then expand again? It necessitates us moving backward. It necessitates a retrograde aspect. The core challenge of this, of holding feminine energy without limiting her expression, is my capacity to be dynamic, my capacity to be a dynamic container. And ironically, it is when it bumps up against my ego that it paves the way. It's when I admit to bumping up against the ego. As Ryan Holiday so eloquently put it, ego is the enemy. I highly recommend this book. The ego is there to serve us. It protects us and it holds us. But in order to do so, it keeps us from growth. It keeps us from expanding. And so it protects us. And often, especially with men, it protects our pride and not necessarily always in the service of our growth. Rarely, actually. The masculine ego exists not just in the men, but it's also in the feminine as well. So this can apply there. Ego-driven behavior across genders is really at the root of so much of the relationship challenges that people face. You know your ego is in control when you need to be right at all costs, when you only see two choices, when you have black and white thinking. You know your ego is in control when you view everything through hierarchical lenses, when you perceive the world as inherently unsafe. You know your ego is in control when you feel unworthy of love and belonging, unless you achieve, unless you're sexual or beautiful, unless you produce or protect, unless you're there to keep your mouth shut and do what you're told. You know your ego is in control when something innocuous happens in the relationship and you feel triggered beyond belief. And I know for everyone this happens. It happens to me. The trigger isn't the problem. The trigger points the way. It points the way forward. Embrace the suck. Trust the trigger. Trust the sucky moment. Can you see that every time that I get triggered, my ego is getting hit? Can I see that this is an opportunity for me to learn how to create a container and a practice of examining that trigger, holding that trigger, accepting it, admitting it, loving it, and ultimately alchemizing the energy. And it comes through love. It comes through my capacity to accept myself, to allow it, to admit it, to accept it, to embrace it. And I'm telling you, this is the work. This is the inner work. You can't do it in front of other people at first. You got to separate. You got to go and do it on your own. And you've got to do it in practice. For me, it's a practice of being as much as possible in nature or connected to nature. Because as soon as I can feel the frequency of nature, I am reminded that this is nature at work. Nature loves death. Nature loves the renewal. Nature is death. There is no spring without winter. The feminine's job is actually to provoke us, to trigger us. Her expansion is synonymous with her expression. There is no expansion without desire. And her desire, her expression, and her expansion is going to trigger you, is going to provoke you, is going to create situations where you're going to feel like it sucks. What you get when you get good at this and you start being able to really hold yourself in this, you start learning what's in the way of her achieving her desire. If you ultimately want her to expand, you want her to have her desires, what's holding her from that? What's holding the feminine from surrendering? What is in the way? And the only way I can even get to a place of curiosity is to actually move away from the rage pathway to the curious pathway, which I highly recommend Brad Stolberg's book, Master of Change, which is really a treatise on everything that I'm speaking about here. But what he talks about, there's two pathways in the brain. There's the rage pathway, and then there's the curiosity or seeking pathway. What we need to do is get into the seeking pathway and be curious of what's standing in the way of her expansion, of her desire. And what you realize is that when you get triggered, you're seeing it as an act of love. Can I change it around to feel like, oh my God, she's loving me? If my growth is what I want, and that the only way that I can grow is to get triggered and to hold that and to alchemize that, just like the only way to get stronger emotionally and spiritually is literally to get triggered. The setup of the relationship is that. But here's the catch. You need to be in a container and in a committed relationship where both of you are invested in each other's growth. Because in order for you to be able to do this, she needs to respect your process, and you need to create a container of the process. She has an inherent need to have a voice and to speak her truth. She's going to desire things. She's going to express, and she's going to resist your containment. The feminine being, by its nature, is promiscuous in her desires to feel, to sense, to be sexual. There is a collision between the masculine imperative to contain and the woman's voice and desire and bigness. All of this bumps up against the masculine, and that's actually the point. This isn't a flaw. This is actually the way it works. This actually means things are going well. It's my capacity to feel this, to transmute this, to change this. This is the same thing that the Mayo Clinic talks about when it defines suffering. And it says that suffering is pain times resistance equals suffering. Another way that I will say then that the flow of a relationship is the truth times control equals friction of the feminine expression. This friction is DSRX. This is polarity. We share a common pain. Women feel unworthy. Men feel unworthy. Women feel inadequate. Men feel inadequate. Women feel abandoned. Men feel abandoned. But guess what? Men feel unworthy, abandoned, inadequate. And what do they do when they feel this way? They put it out into the world. What does the feminine do when it feels this way? It takes it into itself. And so, as someone who loves women, someone who's passionate and devoted to my woman, but also loves all women and loves the feminine, I care deeply about women's well-being. And what I have seen and witnessed is this part of a woman's predilection to take her pain and to internalize it has created a situation where it is doing real damage to women and real damage to their expression. And what I've observed are some core patterns that women have. I've seen this in Rachel and I've seen it elsewhere. Women contort. They reshape themselves physically, spiritually, and emotionally to fit the expectations of their man and even more so of society at large. Women brace. They are in a constant state of physical and emotional tensing against the truth and social interactions. The greatest testament to my relationship with Rachel is that her default energy with me is no longer bracing. Third, women defer. They put other needs consistently before their own. And then, as I spoke about initially, women deflect. Rather than redirecting criticism, they take it inward and they take it on and they punish themselves. They'd rather punish themselves and keep their mouths shut rather than cause friction or upset. There is a chronic self-suppression and emotional repression and self-abandonment and self-betrayal that has created dire health consequences in women. Research shows a striking correlation between women's health issues and emotional suppression. The majority of autoimmune disorders affect women disproportionately. There are three key factors. 1, a predisposition. 2, a gut lining depletion. And 3rd, a trigger. And one of those triggers is chronic stress that is created by constant self-betrayal, a voice, and the emotional suppression. As Vanderkirk wrote, the body keeps the score. And this is why I tell Rachel that I don't want her obedience. I don't want her to perform obedience. I want her truth. If her obedience is her truth, I want it. But I don't want the performative part of it. I want her expression, always. I'm here for the long haul. As Ben Greenfield said recently, as you work out, as you age, maximize your leverage for longevity, not for daily performance. It's the same with our relationships. It's the same with your woman. If you want longevity with your woman, you want her truth. I'm a self-professed dom, loves a submissive woman. I love her to just be in complete compliance and submission. And yet, paradoxically, I don't want my woman's default to be yes. I don't want her default to be yes. I don't want her default to be contortion. I don't want her default to be suppressing her voice. I want her to say yes because that's what she means. I'm interested in her well-being, her health. I'm interested in her truth. Non-performative submission and obedience is extremely attractive. Performative submission and obedience is extremely unattractive. See the title of this episode. Integrity, sincerity, and devotion are the natural side effects of a woman who is held, supported, and contained in her voice. This is clearly displayed in a performative sexual act versus a passionate, surrendered, sincere sexual act. Most can feel the difference, and they're craving the latter. How could you have this all the time? Make this your practice of your relationship, the DSRX way of having her speak her truth. I tell her I love her. I want you, but I want to set you free. I want your voice. My ownership of you is only conditional on the fact that you expand into your authenticity, into your truth. There's a contradiction in this. Yet to completely have a surrendered woman, you actually have to set her free. The problem we have with traditional containment and the traditional DS relationship is it doesn't build in the need for the RX component of this, for how well can a man hold himself in his ego death. Women are so conditioned to deal with the fragility of the male ego when they speak up that they can't even fathom a world where their voice and their truth could be freely expressed. And I'm not to say that this is going to happen all at once. There is a certain titration that's necessary, a certain dosing that's necessary, especially if your voice has been suppressed or you've self-betrayed throughout this time. Just like a workout, this is something that's going to be gradual and it's going to take some time. I also want to call out in this that wounded men, I am one of those men. I am a wounded man who's loved submissive women because these women protected me from seeing myself clearly and protected me from essentially from being triggered. And this is why so many women traditionally have kept themselves from this sort of dynamic, is because they equate it to the suppression of their voice and to coddling a male's ego. And I'm here to tell you, the way of the DSRX, the way that Rachel and I practice this, it's the opposite of this. My ego is constantly being self-actualized. And so there can be a propensity for wounded men to have women who suppress their voice to protect the man's ego. This becomes toxic over the long term and does not serve either party. How can we have a containment that expands rather than restricts? The real challenge is that most men don't know how to go through ego death. The hyper-masculine man often over-identifies with the masculine traits. And when those traits get tested, he loses. Like if he loses his money, if he loses his physical strength, or if he encounters a woman with a voice that contradicts his worldview, he becomes reactive. He holds her down and holds back. This man must be able to experience ego death. He must experience a catharsis, a death to himself and his identity. And see, this is one of the things that's interesting for our relationship that I want to speak about. Just last night, there was a trigger that occurred between Rachel and I collapsed for a moment. And I expressed without setting a prior containment. It provoked in Rachel a tear of sadness and grief that just was overwhelming. And in her grief and her sadness and in her expression, I further collapsed and I further was triggered into my own state. In the past, I would have taken that and expressed further or gotten angry or resisted or whatever. In the past, Rachel would have protected me. She would have coddled me. In the past, if I would have expressed as I did, she would have been there to support me in my pain, and she would have suppressed her tears. She would have contorted herself. She would have deflected. She would have braced, and she may even have given to me sexually something to soothe me. And then what she did instead was immediately go into tears, immediately showed me how my collapse affected and impacted her heart. It broke her heart. I mean, I felt like she was dying. And it wasn't performance on her part. it was a wellspring of emotional tears and grief. And I couldn't hold her in that moment. It was further collapsing for me, and I recognize it. But because I'm committed to the DSRX method, I have recognized that that was an opportunity for me to take an RX moment. And I knew that she trusts me when I get out of bed in the middle of the night, that I'm not going somewhere to go and look on my phone. In fact, I left my phone. I'm not going to go look at porn. I'm not going to go soothe myself with alcohol or sports. Instead, I'm going to go sit with my pain. I'm going to go embrace the suck. I'm going to feel into what was I afraid of feeling in that moment. It was a trigger about my capacity to take care of her and to hold her and support her. And I had to alchemize my pain. I had to be there with my pain. I had to reconnect to my relationship with nature. When I think of spirituality, I think of it as my capacity to have an ego death, my capacity to keep my heart open when I'm going through a challenging moment. Because what happens in those moments when I collapse? What happens in those moments when I'm having a trigger? My heart's closing up. And so what's necessary is for my heart to stay open. So what I had to do was to exclude myself from the moment. I went and I looked at the moon. I just was with Earth. I connected to that. I came back into my body, was able to go back to sleep, but I wasn't able to go back and comfort her. I wasn't able to go back and try to fix the relationship. And so in the morning, we went to our normal morning practice. We didn't even really discuss what took place because we both trust the practice and our commitment that when I collapse, I take care of my work, my stuff. She does not coddle me. She does not go take care of the little boy. She does not go and contort herself. She's impartial to it. She doesn't make it worse, but she's impartial. She trusts it. She sees it. And when I collapse, she gets more in her feminine. She actually gets more expressive. So I become aware of the impact of my collapse upon her, upon that trigger. But then I see when I get that trigger, I see that I have some work to do. And instead of bemoaning that, resisting it and getting all mad and embarrassed and shamed like I used to, I excuse myself if I'm not able to do it in the moment. I go and I recenter myself and I recalibrate and I bring myself back into my power and into my strength so I can come back to her from a stronger space, that I can return to being able to hold her in that. In most relationships, it can be a real danger when women coddle the man and they keep him from experiencing his ego death. She's doing a real disservice to his growth. She needs him to grow. She needs him to expand. And the only way the masculine can grow is to feel pain. Thus, embrace the suck. And she needs to express herself. She needs to have her voice. She needs to state her desires. She needs to let him go through his ego death on his own. He needs to create a structure that says, woman, I don't want your comfort. I don't want your sympathy or even your empathy. I want your impartiality. I want your trust, and I want you to trust me to do my work. It's imperative on him then that he has integrity, that he's not going to some addiction to soothe himself in those moments. It's important on him to go and actually do the work so she can trust him. And it's important that there's a container there. She can say, you got this, go take care of yourself. Rachel never says that, but I feel that from her. So come back to me when you're a man again, when you're not in that little boy coddling energy. This is the dynamic that Rachel and I have and that we've committed to, and it's been transformative. When I get triggered, when I'm off, I take care of myself. If I go to her in those moments, I don't get the ego transformation. I don't get the growth. All of the problems in our relationship were because I was going to her to seek solace and seek soothing, and I was unconsciously in a little boy energy. And that's what I had to eradicate to really truly get into this relationship. This is how these relationships, like a DSRX relationship, becomes like yoga. It becomes like a Bikram practice or a meditation or a martial art. It breaks you down. It tests you. It moves you away and says, go into your ego. Feel the expansiveness. Feel how awesome it is to have a surrendered woman. Like it actually serves the relationship for you to get a little bit big in your ego so that you expand into it and then you bump up against her. And if she's a feminine being, you will never be able to contain that fully without getting triggered. You have to die to yourself repeatedly and then you come back. This is the spiritual practice. How well do you deal with death? How well can my ego die? And then how can I come back into a belief in faith, in love? And how much can I have an open heart? How much can I believe in an infinite? How much can I come with her when she's through crying or in a bad situation? How much can I maintain my composure and my heart and be James Bond with an open heart? Real spirituality helps me understand that there is no truth that doesn't contain a paradox. It develops my energetic literacy and my ability to de-escalate a situation merely by my presence. The most beautiful people, the most awesome people out there, they've known defeat, they've known suffering, they've known grief, they've known struggle, they've known loss. We feel it in them. Don't think your relationship is problematic because it contains that. It's actually succeeding. It's your capacity to alchemize that, your capacity to hold that, your capacity to die to your ego. Reframe the pain. Embrace the suck. Reframing the pain in the dynamic, like all BDSM, this is what subs are masters at. Women are masters at this. We men are the ones that aren't good at reframing the pain. We think of submissive person as receiving the pain, but in a true dom-sub relationship that is lasting, it's actually the dominant energy that most needs to see pain as a growth catalyst. Most women are awesome at seeing pain as growth. They've had this as a practice. It's mostly us men who have fragility around emotional pain and ego death. All women know that most men are fragile when it comes to their emotions. That's why they keep their mouths shut. That's why they contort. Women have kept quiet and don't use their voice because most men can't handle it. But a true dominant can handle both his discomfort and her discomfort. Most of the time, women are actually handling their discomfort and their man's discomfort. And they're holding everyone energetically. And that's why they're exhausted. And that's why they're getting ill. And they're craving you to be able to hold them. If you commit to a DSRX relationship, you're committing to being disillusioned in your relationship. You're committing to having your relationship feel like it might end. You're committing to it actually ending. You're committing to moving away from your comfort zones. You're committing to embracing the suck. You're committing to moving past the fantasy. And you're committing to realize that your pain and your grief and your disillusionment are gifts. And they're here to help you grow. And that's how you gain neuroplasticity. You gain growth because you can start loving it. You learn to love when you're dealing with pain and grief. Otherwise, it's like courage. Unless you feel fear, there's no courage. Unless it's a tough situation that's shitty, there's no love. The gift is in the friction of polarity. There's a gift here. And this is where trauma gets healed. This is where scenes can get created that can heal massive trauma. This is where day in, day out can be like being in nature, because you are nature. You become nature. You live nature. Because you're dealing with death and fear and polarity all the time. And you're being loved and held in it by yourself, because you're not afraid to feel the feels that you're most afraid to feel. One of the things that's really interesting that Rachel has complimented me for is that it's kind of ironic, but I'm a master at messing up. I'm a master at being the fool of making mistakes and then alchemizing and coming back. When I was in grad school, my art teacher told me that if there was an award for most improved, it would be me. It's something that I have become really interested in is the alchemization. It is the gift of transformation. How can we change? How can we grow? And how can we take things that are tough situations or failure or defeat and transform them? And what I bring to Rachel is like, let's bring it on every day. And so what I tell to her and I assure her is that I want her to tell me when things are off that I'm doing. I want her to know, like if I bring her eggs, if I make her coffee and it's not how she wants it, I want to know. She's never complained. I mean, I am so blessed. I literally have, Rachel, you have to realize is if there was like submissive heaven, like if you could picture the most perfect heaven, archetypal submissive, it's like a Dom's dream is what I got with Rachel through and through. And she just fell in love with me and was like, I'm yours. And so we've literally had to change our entire relationship dynamic from an unconscious DS perspective because there was a fly in the ointment, which was she was protecting my ego. And because she was protecting my ego, she wasn't growing and expanding. She was contracting. And she recognized it in every relationship prior to me. Every time she got in a relationship, she got contracted. And every time she got out of the relationship, she expanded. And so we had some real challenging, some health things and some other things to wake up to this DSRX method, which is to say, how can we build in the ego death? How can we really rewire the way that we think of DS relationships? And this is what it looks like. And so, for example, there is a period of time that's stressful, that's challenging, where her words bump up against my ego. The first time she ever told me that I had bad manners, I flipped out. Table manners, I reacted in an explosive way. I don't do that anymore. I've told her many times, it's going to be uncomfortable for you to say what you want to say to me. You're going to be uncomfortable. And this is where, for her, she needs to be able to hold her own discomfort. She needs to be able to hold her own suck in this, because her expressing her voice is going to be uncomfortable because it is going to trigger me. And we went through a period where I was really reactive. I was explosive. And I had to learn how to really refine that and not be so reactive. It was a practice. And so I say, keep doing it. It's exposure therapy. Let me get better at it. Like it's like weights where I can get better. And so she's been trained as a woman that if she brings pain or discomfort to someone, it's a signal that she shouldn't do it anymore. So she stops. And I say the opposite. I say, keep doing it to me. There's a safe container for this. And I'm here to tell you on the other side that things are better. Things are extremely better, that we actually are living this dynamic that I'm speaking about. And even with her going through the physical pain that she's going through, that's actually a testament. Her body is finally safe enough to break down, finally safe enough to actually deal with a lot of the challenges that she's had. She's no longer having to just brace herself and keep plowing forward. She's actually able to really feel things. And in so doing, there is often this period where it seems like she's going backward, and that's her story to tell. But this is also important for me to see that my woman being always in vital, dynamic, expansion, sexy, beautiful is not always what it looks like. Can we reframe that? That's not necessarily like the end, that this is actually a portal or an initiation into her truth-telling, into her authenticity, into her true surrender, her true feminine and her voice. And how can I hold that? We've been practicing for this for years, and it's still hard, but it's way better than it was. And I'm going to say, women, if you're in a situation where you're not in this kind of relationship and you fully come out on a level 10, you're going to break them, and they won't have the skill to put themselves back together and hold and do the alchemy, and the relationship will contract. So you have to learn how to rupture and repair, rupture and repair, rupture and repair. And you start to see that the rupture and the repair can be rapturous, and it can be kind of this beautiful process. I love the word titration and dosage. Both of them come from the chemistry world, but they're very appropriate because it is our energy, a feminine energy with the masculine energy is chemistry. And it is a law of nature. And so use it accordingly. And there's a craft to it. There's a craft of the DSRX. This is really what it comes down to. I have to learn how to hold myself. I have to learn my own titration, my own rupture, and my own repair. When she triggers me, it means I'm not able to hold myself in that moment. I need to strengthen my emotional capacity and my ability to die to my ego. I think it's like memento mori. It's a Latin phrase that they used in the Middle Ages, the mystics did, celebration of death. I must visualize and feel, literally feel my death, feel my ego's death, feel the things I don't want to feel. And I have to start loving the emotional pain, loving the embracing times when I'm getting massively triggered. And so when Rachel asks for something or expressing something and it triggers me, it's her truth in that moment, and that might fluctuate, but it is my capacity to hold her in that moment and not collapse where she feels like she can then surrender more. How do both sides deal with the transitionary period? That actually never goes away. You never stop getting triggered. You never stop feeling the feelings. You just learn how to love them. You learn how to comfort yourself in them. And so the container for all of this, and when we talk about containment is love. But it's not just our love in our relationship. It's actually me loving me. I have learned to love myself in this relationship. More than anything, I don't need the relationship to validate me. I don't need her surrender and her submission to make me feel better or to make me feel like more of a man or make me feel like I am more loved. I come in with that. I'm solid. I'm good. And so when I can do that, then I'm overflowing in my love for her, and there's no needy kind of child energy. I can be a container. It's my capacity, really, to love her. But it's another way I say it is, it's to do two things: die to my ego and grow the fuck up. And dying to my ego is growing the fuck up. And it's dying to my ego in an elegant way, in a way with craft, in a way where I don't make it about the other person. And that's what I'm speaking about. And that's the practice that you learn and that you grow with. And so I start loving myself more. I love my environment more. That my set and setting, I can bring that. And so myself, my body becomes a container just by being around. I'm a presence that can hold love. And it's where my alchemizing the parts of myself that I most despise, my shame, my trials, my embarrassment, my triggers around feeling like I'm not enough, that's where I start to really learn to be what love is. And love is not just between me and her. It's something that is the default frequency of an expanding universe. And when I can tap into that and really feel that, I feel awe and I feel sublime. And so this is where the relationship starts to become something much more than getting our rocks off. It becomes something that is of nature, that's sublime, that expands beyond just the relationship. And it's only can happen because I'm embracing my own inner feminine, my own inner capacity to be in my death and rebirth that the feminine does so well. And there's a healing that takes place. And I'm looking forward, and I see that this relationship is building more communities, and there are other couples out there doing this, and there are other people doing this, and I'm inspired by this and so appreciative of that. So please, I'd love to hear people's comments, any reflections on this episode and on the DSRX that I'm speaking of. Next week, Rachel's going to be on the episode, and would love in the comments or any places if what you would love to hear from Rachel, if you have anything that you'd love to hear from her voice, and what would be any questions you might have for her. It's the last episode of season 4. Before I go, I'm going to share 8 questions for reflection. Where do I feel the urge to control rather than host? When triggered, can I see this as an opportunity for ego death and growth? How might I be suppressing my own truth or encouraging my partner to suppress her truth or their truth? What pattern of silencing and self-betrayal do I recognize in myself or my partner? How can I create a container that allows for expansion rather than restriction? Where do I need to grow up to hold space for my partner's full expression? Am I willing to feel like hell sometimes as a part of this growth process? And most importantly, how can I get the tools to hold myself and alchemize my hell into love? Thanks for listening. Please sound off on any comments, as I mentioned. Also, Rachel and I are both here for you. If you need our support in any part of this journey, we both work individually and as a couple with others. Please see the links for any further information about that. And just so you know, you will suffer. It's just informed openness. There's a lot of grief in this work, and it's beautiful and such an honor to be in this journey of transformation when you're in a committed DSRX relationship. Thank you.